Yesterday's update was lackluster on many fronts, as we talked about. There really wasn't all that much added in, despite there being a couple of things that still have yet to come in Operation Grand Heist. Arsenal Sandstorm was delayed until what is eventually today, and we finally, just as of a couple of hours ago, got the patch notes for yesterday's update, as small as it was. So, curiously enough though, out of that, there were a couple of weapon tunings, and I mean just a couple, only two, to weapons that are already considered some of the best in the game, and they got buffs. So today we're going to talk about this, and then I also want to give you guys some heads up and maybe best class setups here with this and my recommendations for using this, because they can absolutely shred. So kind of take this as a little amendment to yesterday's update video, but also more so talking about the weapons and how best to utilize them. And before we jump into it, since we're talking about weapon tuning, if you could change one weapon in Black Ops 4, what would it be and how would you change it? Let me know in the comments down below. But let's jump into the video. Out of the slight little patch notes that came live here that we didn't talk about yesterday is that, again, Arsenal Sandstorm is available for free for all platforms. There was a little bit of a erroneous tweet sent out earlier in the day saying it was PlayStation 4 exclusive, but then it was corrected to say it was all platforms. But the one thing that I noticed also is that I still have not come into contact with this at all in game, so maybe you guys have, maybe not, but it seems like it's not necessarily pushed to the forefront in that map rotation percentage of what is selected, what is thrown in the mix there for random and other things considered. They'll sometimes boost up that percentage of how quickly it jumps up for newer maps. But the only other thing detailed that we didn't talk about in yesterday's video really was that of some weapon tunings to the Rampart 17 and the KN57. Both, again, as we mentioned, probably some of the better weapons in the game depending on who you ask. Before this, we ended up seeing that the Rampart 17 ended up having an increased ADS in speed, meaning that it got a little bit faster, speed referring to a buff, time referring to a nerf in that case, and the KN57 had a slightly reduced recoil as well as increased ADS in speed, and the quick draw attachment having additional increased ADS in speed there. So slight buffs all around, but still buffs to already dominant weapons. Now, these also ended up translating over into zombies exactly, but in Blackout, it was a slight subtle change here that incorporated some of these buffs, but not necessarily all of them. The Rampart had that increased ADS in speed in Blackout as well, but then the KN57 also had just a slightly reduced recoil, not having those ADS in speeds touched at all for Blackout. Now, this surprises me for a couple of different reasons. The biggest one being that these weapons already, again, were dominant. The rifles in this game seem to be the dominant class, at least from my MP experience. That said, the Rampart already leads and has the highest DPS or damage per shot of all the rifles in this game, and even though it has a lesser mobility than that of, say, the KN or the Maddox, it's still one of the most versatile weapons out there. Of course, your things like the Auger with the Operator mod, your snipers and things like that will all deal more damage per shot respectively, but that's because they're tactical rifles or a sniper rifle. They're meant to do that. Rifles have that mid-range fire rate that will make them more versatile for medium-range engagement and spraying players down potentially, but also offering a little more mobility and a little bit more aggressive of playstyle as compared to those other classifications. So the Rampart and the KN57 getting buffs already kind of surprised me because they were those better weapons of the bunch. But I'm curious if this is done because Treyarch wants players to kind of utilize other weapons than just the Maddox. While, of course, it's not necessarily the sole focus, a lot of the weapon balancing comes a lot in part from pros, as so much of their day-to-day is literally using the weapons in the game. That's where you can probably get the most hardcore feedback as compared to somebody that ends up playing just on the weekends as they take a break from their everyday life. So it's that fine balance between bringing over changes that the players that are diehard and contest all the time can bring over and benefit the entirety of the Black Ops 4 populace and player count, but also not catering specifically to them. So with the Maddox being so overused in a lot of those different roles as being probably the best hybrid weapon that we've seen in ages, being that it has the mobility near of an SMG and also that of the damage and of course range of a rifle, it's insanely good. So my guess is that they're bringing this up in line to offer a little bit more counterplay to that, or in hopes of trying to shift the meta ever so slightly. But whatever the reasoning may be, the KN57 and the Rampart already were viable weapon options, but now they're even more so with these slight tuning adjustments. So here's my recommendations here for it. Honestly, I think that we're going to start out with the KN57 because it, of course, has a little bit more added onto it, and this buff is a little more significant than that of just the Rampart, but it's also probably my preferred of the two, even though the Rampart does deal more damage per shot. So jumping on the KN57 front, I'd highly recommend the class setup that you end up seeing on screen. Of course, it's the KN57 with a couple of attachments, a couple of perks, no secondary, and of course, our favorite of Stim Shot for that equipment or gear. Now, on the KN itself, I end up running the ELO sight because, as mentioned, I absolutely love that precision, but I don't like the intrusion that the regular reflex sight makes with that iron box outline. Now, of course, the KN's iron sights aren't terrible, but it is something that I prefer that precision red dot point for a little further engagements. Then we end up running quick draw, grip, as well as stock, just to give the absolute most mobility here for this and get our gun up as fast as possible. Grip, of course, allowing you to have a little less recoil compared to the base weapon, and while the KN doesn't have a ton of recoil, it also doesn't have as minimal as, say, the ICR does. So in that regard, it kind of finds itself in that Goldilocks zone where it's just right if you can control it. I'm a creature of habit, so you'll see a lot of this transfer over into the Rampart class setup, but one thing that you will not is that we end up running 3 perks. On the next class setup, we only run 2, and we run Scavenger, Lightweight, as well as Dead Silence. The Scavenger simply because I usually run Crash, but I can end up running this without, and because, well, we don't have enough slots in our pick 10 to end up allocating another attachment slot with not only the attachment, but also the wild card needed. So in that sense, we kind of call it there and add on another perk to fill out our pick 10 so we're not missing anything, but then we end up running that final equipment of the stim shot, just to allow us to end up healing a little more. But all in all, this class then produces a rifle class setup that is very mobile, very agile, and most importantly, versatile. You can end up taking those shots and engagements at a mid to long range if you end up having the accuracy along with it, but you can also end up utilizing the weapon and its damage up close. While you might not necessarily win a gunfight against a 1v1, while you both hit every single shot you shoot at the exact same time and say the Spitfire, it is something that will still give you a decent chance to end up surviving an engagement in that close quarters scenario. Not entirely sure what B-roll footage I'll end up putting in the background, but you'll probably see a lot of cases where that is the case. I'll take a gunfight at a little longer range, but also engage in the closer fights as well. I think this is probably my favorite of the 2 class setups by far. I just feel a lot more comfortable with the KN. It's a lot more mobile. The ADS speed, though while it did just get adjusted, was already better than that of the Rampart. So it's something you can end up getting your weapon up a lot quicker than that of the Rampart naturally. So if you like to snap on players, it's not quite to the Maddox with double grip, but it's still pretty good. As for the Rampart here, what I would definitely recommend is what you'll see on screen right now, but this class setup is 4 attachments, no optics, 2 perks, and then 1 gear of the stim shot. Now, previously, I ended up doing a class setup talking about this and utilizing the recon or the 2x scope here for this because it minimizes recoil almost entirely. The recoil patterns are slightly adjusted by whatever optic you end up putting on the weapon, and the recon sight actually completely mitigated almost all of that recoil, even without grip. So it was certainly something that is worthwhile, but for this particular one, I kind of decided to go top heavy on the attachments rather than, say, trying to mitigate the recoil entirely. We end up running high caliber 1 and 2, fast mags, as well as grip. Then the perks of lightweight and dead silence, talking about how, again, I'm kind of that creature of habit that likes to keep things very similar. Before this, we end up running the high caliber 1 and 2 attachments so that we not only increase the damage for each headshot that we hit, but also we increase the damage per upper chest shot as well. Now, of course, you need to stack these, so it will take 2 attachments by default here to end up getting that upper chest damage as well. But with the highest DPS on the Rampart plus high cal 1 and 2 offering more damage multipliers for that chest and up, that's insanely good, and something that if you run the Rampart, I don't think that I would ever advocate really much of anything outside of that, other than, of course, adding different things on top of that. But I feel like the high cal 1 and 2 definitely need to be that base of what you end up putting on that Rampart. But then we end up running the fast mags on that to reload faster naturally, and then grip, of course, to reduce the recoil when aiming down sight as well. Now, with this, we end up seeing the lightweight and dead silence doing exactly what you think, lightweight allowing a little bit more mobility, and with the Rampart being a little heavier of a weapon compared to, say, others in that mobile speed, you end up having that get you back in the fight a little quicker. Dead silence, of course, I just don't necessarily like to hear my own footsteps, so with mine muffled, I should be able to hear either the enemies or, unfortunately, sometimes my teammates who will sneak up on me as well. But all in all, that Rampart class setup doesn't necessarily give you as much mobile and around-the-map firepower as you may expect from, say, the KN, but it's definitely something that if you like to play a little slower, not necessarily camp happy, but something where you control an area, you hold that down and completely lock it down, your enemies are going to be hard-pressed to take you out, especially if you end up getting that first shot. But that out of the way, that's the 2 weapons that did get adjusted, kind of on the down low, a little stealth update here for it with yesterday's hotfix and what wasn't eventually revealed until today. So now you know about it a little bit, and also I wanted to give you my recommendations if you wanted to test these out and absolutely shred with it. Truth be told, I'm having a ton of good luck now within deathmatch domination. I know I talked about it yesterday being very sweaty to begin with, but that might have just been the honeymoon phase where everybody's jumping on and testing it out. So therefore, As a result, the higher player count, the more likely you're going to run into better players. But regardless, I had an absolute blast and shredded through some enemies here, as you'll see through some of the gameplay in the background. But want to let you guys know about it. Arsenal Sandstorm also should be in the mix, so take advantage of that if you guys are wanting to experience a map that is, again, a little different, but still the same at its core. But I digress, that's where we're going to wrap it up. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4, MP, Blackout, Zombies. We got you covered the best of updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff. So if any of that interests you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, there's the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. I can live on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. Well, that's it now. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.